Welcome to the Forest Creek podcast. I am in a den of nerddom once again, just like I spent much of my youth. It's a happy place. Don't feel sad. This is a happy place, full of imagination, full of fond memories spent with friends, and a lot of those fond memories are the basis of a film that we just came out of. I'm here with Jake.
Hello.
And Aidan.
Hello.
Been wanting to have you guys on for like a serious recording for quite a while now.
I'm very excited.
It's good to be here.
It's a great subject to come in on.
Right. The film that we just walked out of we saw in theaters. Today is the premiere day, April 1st yesterday was the premiere day, March 31st. Today's April 1st. Happy April Fool's Day.
You almost had him for a sec there. And then you just...
that was it. I got you.
You
April
got him
Fools.
for about a split second. It's the nicest April Fools you get for this year.
It was the Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Honor Among Thieves.
Honor Among Thieves.
Yeah, it was Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves.
Yeah, and don't forget, guys, it's with Chris Pine, not Chris Pratt.
Yes, we've been making that mistake all day because he happens to be...
Hold on. We?
I got him on it.
You two, not me. I know who's who.
We as a collective, we fall or we stand together, Jake.
The Mario movie also
We made the mistake, Jake.
No honor among thieves here. Not in this den.
Den of traitors, more like.
The Mario movie also happens to have come out just recently, and it's been controversially voiced by Chris Pratt, which I don't feel like is controversial at all. I feel like he was a great pick, and I don't understand why everybody's so cynical about it.
I don't know. I just kind of wanted more of that trope, I think.
I guess people just have it in their heads that they would prefer the whole movie to be, wahoo, Mamma Mia!
Yeah,
I don't know how you do that for an hour and a half.
I don't know.
I would not be able to watch the movie.
Yeah, it would probably
God
be very
bless Chris Pratt. Just take a hard stance on this one thing I don't really care about. Thing I do care about, Dungeons and Dragons. And when I say that I care about it, I almost mean that a bit loosely, because this is somebody else's story, it's somebody else's canon. To put it in short, Dungeons and Dragons is the title of the board game that the movie is based on, created by Gary Gygax. Basically, the board game came out in a time where nerd culture was becoming heavily influenced with the tales of Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien and many other such fantasy stories revolving around orcs and elves and swords and medieval chivalry, but at the same time fantasy magic. The game has developed over the years and drawn in its very own subculture, and that's in a large part due to the fact that it enables groups of people who, for the longest time, weren't very typically social, to come together to play a game, something that they were all interested in. That, and it enables you to exercise your imagination in a way that very few other board games do. That being that the core gameplay of Dungeons & Dragons, which has seeped now into many other tabletop RPGs, including Pathfinder that we frequented for a long time, is basically that you have a single player who is the storyteller, often called the Dungeon Master, the Game Master. I'm not sure if there's been any other names for it.
I don't think there's any other...
Custom systems will try to do like their own take on it, but it all boils down to the same thing.
Yeah, it's again, it originates with D&D in the sense of a Dungeon Master.
And ideally, this person is the kind of storyteller. They are the facilitator of the imagination, while the other players around the table are essentially characters in that story. They're often trying to accomplish quests that they make for themselves while they play basically imaginary characters. To further facilitate this and keep track of things, they have papers with their scores written onto them, which often seem like complicated math and gibberish to anybody who is, uninitiated. And to simulate random chance, we have dice rolling. And not just six-sided dice like we're all used to. We're talking the 20s, the iconic dodecahedrons, the octahedrons.
The full set of polyhedral dice, you're gonna have to tackle this whole thing, and you're gonna need a lot of those dice sets, not just one, in many cases.
Especially when you start getting up there in terms of the numbers. Now, another thing that Dungeons & Dragons inspired was that video game-esque idea of hit points and experience and levels and scores and stats.
Yeah.
This constitutes a lot of the mathematics of it. But despite all the mathematics and a lot of the detailed fantasies and mythologies and lores that go into playing these games, fundamentally, at the center of it all, something very important that has not changed is the fact that this is a bunch of friends having fun with their imagination, which is perhaps the most important thing. We, the three of us, we became friends because, largely, of this game.
Yeah, I would say that's very accurate. I mean, I met you through Matt from a Pathfinder game.
Yeah.
Which is heavily takes from 3.5 of Dungeons and Dragons. I knew Aidan before that, but we never actually interacted in any meaningful way up until that point.
Aside from random interactions on like party nights where
Jared would have you over, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, cool.
Introduced just as Raph was through Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
But over the years, because we have played so many stories and characters together and gone on entire adventures, we lived little lives in our imagination that are as vividly remembered as they are our like in-person camping trips and stuff.
I think it's funny because we almost annoyingly just keep talking about the same things every single time. And I'm guilty of that 100%. Yes. But I mean, it's such a prevalent thing even now in our friends group. And this isn't the case where many of us in that group, we haven't actually played in a game together for the larger scope. Maybe a few of us, maybe 2, maybe 3, but generally speaking, it's gone from like massive 6 people parties down to, maybe 3 or 4.
I've been gone out of it for like 6 months. I like went through heroin levels of withdrawal.
You
went
insane. From having like 9 people in a campaign at one point, and then delved into this multi-year epic that finally culminated in what I think was the only true finished campaign that I can recall from anyone from our group who actually finished a campaign. Most of them, they go for a while and then they kind of stop.
Now, we would love to spend, as Jake just mentioned, the next couple hours just reminiscing about our victories, our triumphs, our losses, our traumas, all of it.
Oh yeah.
We have a movie to review.
But we have a movie to review.
Let me just start by giving everyone a quick overview. The Dungeons and Dragons movie is actually not a movie about people literally playing the game Dungeons and Dragons, but it is a movie that follows a story which takes place in this imaginary world. At least the canonized version of it, as set by Gary Gygax. If you are a deep fan of of Dungeons and Dragons, you'll recognize many of the names that they put out there, for instance, or even some of the magic items or MacGuffins that occur in the plot. And I'm sure the two of you have actually recognized a number of the different magical happenstances, spells, creatures.
Oh, tons, yeah. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of creatures that were recognizable. There were some races that I actually kind of had to take a second look at because they did do it a little differently, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Finish up what I was saying. Basically, a quick overview of the plot. Honor Among Thieves, this Dungeons and Dragons story, follows the tale of a band of thieves who was once betrayed and now are picking up the pieces from what they left behind, finding out that a member of their own party was the one who actually betrayed them, and are now trying to recover their honor, recover their riches, recover their status, while saving some of their very own blood. The movie rests quite heavily on the themes of like fatherhood, of choices that you make and whether you're making them selfishly or not. I found that it really resonated deeply with the idea that if you believe in something, it's possible, which is very core to Dungeons & Dragons gameplay to begin with. And, well, I mean, we'll dive in deeper and explore the rest, but I'm curious, what were you guys' impressions of it?
Overall, pretty good. The story was very typical for a D&D session. It did feel like the constant questing in order to achieve certain goals to aid you to the next and the next and the next. It felt like a true campaign. You could see arcs acting as effectively a few sessions each. And as a result, it gave me a vibe very similar to that, as well as seeing all the iconic D&D weapons, spells, monsters that as they appeared. It was definitely an adventure for a hardcore fan and a good introduction to the whimsical and mystical nature of this world. As for the storyline itself, it touches on some very iconic characters such as Saz Tam and the Red Wizards of Thay. Overall, the story though, and the acting, I'll give it a B.
Yeah, I was gonna say, from what I got from the entire plot of it, it played into a lot of tropes, and a lot of classic tropes. Okay, you can really, if you really break it down, you can look at it like this: you have a father who had the good old Disney move where they killed off the wife for whatever reason, and his daughter, and then the pseudo mom that comes in to try and take over the parental role, but not forcefully. It was very natural, so it was kind of like a sweet moment.
Yeah, it's a theme of found family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is totally what a band of thieves are, is a found family. But what I found with it is that you very much had some of the classic movie tropes. Essentially, if you look at it, it's like one guy betrays the rest of the party, steals away the daughter. She acts as a princess that is now locked away in a castle by instead of just physical barriers, but lies and deception and manipulation keeping her there. And now the dad gets a gang of people together to go rescue her. And I don't find that bad. I thought, okay...
It's a cliche for a reason.
Yeah, it's cliche, but that's any movie. But the cliche, it fits here. That's the difference, is that it fits very well based off of the world that you're in. I did find the pacing to be, from the actual cinematography and movie standpoint, the pacing of it was a little rushed, in my opinion. And I found, yes, it was different quests, and they were all leading and cascading into one another, but it was cascading rather quickly. They had maybe 2 or 3 different major points, but there was 6 or 7. I would be able to get behind it more as a better overarching story, but it was just too much of jumping between. It's one of those things that I think modern cinema has had an issue with.
It's about the pacing with this game. The point of D&D is that it is a long-term investment where you are building this story together. It takes a lot longer to get through that campaign, and having to cram it into a movie does make it feel rushed. But what they did with it is I feel they turned it into more of the show tour, allowing you to see all the different aspects, the grandeur of it.
That's fair.
Without having to explain too much, because as well you could do a 10-day lore dive on just the one realm that they lived in.
When it comes to fantasy stories in general, we know stories like Lord of the Rings, and more popularly now we know stories like Game of Thrones. But the thing these all have in common is that they're very long. And just like D&D itself, like you mentioned, what did that big campaign that we actually finished, how long did it take? It took more than a year.
It took
of
actually
us regularly
just
meeting.
shy of 2 years with weekly
Just
meetings.
shy of 2 years.
Yeah.
So when you think about, can we fit an entire D&D arc into one thing? Well, actually, that's 100% true. You can. There's such a thing as playing one-shots. There's such a thing as playing mini-campaigns. There's ways to condense the story. But was it rushed? Yes. And I think that actually suffers because of the way... it's caused, and it's the source of a lot of the movie suffering, is the way that it was created. The story was created, is that it was very much inspired by something that the actors themselves played at a table.
Yeah.
But as a fan of the game or someone looking to get into it, I think that is a very good thing. I loved the movie for the ability to actually go through it and recognize all these different aspects of this game that I've grown up with now.
That's fair. I will agree to that, because I think one of the best and one of the strengths of this film is that it showcases things from a starting point for a party to things of an end game point of a party, and that development. It's in a very quick manner, but it does show the development.
I was more or less satisfied by the plot, the contrivances of it, the character arcs of it. If anything, it felt like at times the characters lacked personality.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a few of them where it was just kind of
Which is something that kind of comes up every now and then in D&D. To the uninitiated, when I tell you you're going to play a barbarian, you have a stereotypical personality in mind for who that barbarian is. There's not much else to it, so when you start playing this barbarian, you act like that. Although the class that you're playing is not necessarily a set personality. You're allowed to have ideas and stuff outside of that. And the same actually goes for, and you mentioned this earlier, race, just for the people who don't understand, there are such things as elves and orcs and dwarves and halflings and all these other different types of races. So when you are creating a D&D character, you do pick a race and you do pick classes. Usually just one class is what people have known classically. Like I said, picking these things isn't actually supposed to be the source of what your personality is. Because that personality is also going to become the basis of your character arc in a story, right? I could be any class and be greedy.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So that my character arc can be learning not to be greedy, for instance.
Oh yeah, you could be the most holy of you could be a cleric or a paladin. You could be completely greedy.
Yeah, a miserly do-gooder would be fun.
I think for the uninitiated, though, it is a very good way to kind of show them what a typical one would look like when you were to join your very first campaign.
That's quite
It's
true.
something to look at that you're gonna typically see.
Now,
You're gonna see a paladin who is all up
If
and
I
just and all that sort of stuff.
wanted to be very blunt about what this is, it's Guardians of the Galaxy, but with magic and fantasy.
100%.
Oh, 100%.
And I love it as a
Yeah.
result. I don't think it was as well done as Guardians of the Galaxy.
No.
No,
And
no.
that's where I'm saying, like, this is I'll give Guardians an A. I will give this a B. I'll give this a solid B. I
I
think
give
it's
it a B plus.
okay.
I give it a B plus, only on the ground here that I left the theater not hating any of the characters, which is something that is typically really hard because a lot of times I'll leave like even Guardians of the Galaxy, like I
That's
really
one
don't.
thing I actually give it is that I didn't dislike any of the characters.
No, and you know what? Even the stereotypical things that they did was actually enjoyable. And that was the thing that I kind of appreciated was that, okay, it wasn't just them doing the same boring stuff over and over again of, maintaining a stereotype. They actually did it in a way that was digestible. And that's what I appreciated. Because there's so many of them. It's just it's not digestible. You just kind of cringe at it because it's just something that's it's so like you've seen it a bunch of times in different movies, and you're just like, okay, I'm so done hearing this. And these ones, at least they were like fresh takes on the stereotype, to a degree.
No, I wouldn't even say like the stereotype was sincere. That was, I think, the best thing of like, if you want to do anything good, just do it sincerely. And I think that really played into this movie because we weren't seeing some kind of like, I don't know, comment about climate change buried into the character arc. No, it wasn't that at all. It was just the characters being themselves.
Yep.
There wasn't anything buried in there. And because it was sincere, it was at least more palatable.
Yeah. Exactly. I appreciated having a strong, independent woman that didn't have to remind us that she is a strong, independent woman.
Oh, 100%.
I just appreciated that she kicked ass.
Exactly. Honestly, I will say, personality-wise, a lot of them were lacking. What was her name? Olga? Is that her name? Olga Kilgore. I mean,
What a great name.
what a classic barbarian name.
very
Again,
D&D
that's
name.
one of those
It sounds like you
stereotypes.
rolled this.
You sounds like you rolled the name. And you know what? That's something that happens in classic D&D, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But the thing that I think I appreciated the most about Olga is that at least she played a barbarian that felt like a barbarian, but it didn't feel like an over stereotypical barbarian, and she was just fun and cool. It was something where I was like, I got hyped up when she was just going around, just kicking ass, like throwing guards around. Like, it was amazing. It was awesome to watch. Instead of it being like biggest proponent of the I'm a woman and I'm fierce because I'm a woman and not just because I am a fierce person in general, is definitely from Endgame, from Marvel, for Infinity War, when they had the scene where it was just all the women delivering the gauntlet or whatever. Like, you didn't need to frame it that way. Like, we already know they're badass women. Like, let them just
You just
tank
needed them
through
all
it.
to come on set so that we can show this shot and then launch a short Disney Plus series. It's just,
Yeah, it was.
I'm gonna be real honest. I got really bored of Marvel because it just turned into CGI crumbling blocks and flashing colors, and then that.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking about this movie, so here's the thing: this movie, I was mildly entertained. I wouldn't even say it was a bad movie. It touches on things that movies need. My problem with it is that it's not a good film. People did not care enough. There wasn't enough art in this movie. There was a lot of, we're busying ourselves with D&D and we're making ourselves fun to look at, and they were fun to look at. But then what it lacked is it lacked meaning. They didn't give enough meaning to each individual scene, the things that happened. You know, if you watch a modern, like a really well done film, even the mundane things will be done on purpose, with intent, and it'll have meaning ascribed to it. But when I watched some of the scenes in this movie, it occurred to me that some of them are just a way for us to get from one thing to another, which is something that, like, say, the shorter cuts of the Zack Snyder films tend to lack, is that he has a really cool picture in mind, and the things in the movie are just bridges from one of those pictures to the next.
Yeah.
Which can help in a lot of larger ways, because when you do come to those pictures, it's extremely symbolic. But then the moments in between those pictures are lulled, and they don't seem to make a ton of sense, and they feel like somebody's wasting your time with a lot of fun colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree that, again, this film, like Aidan said, it's a B. It's because it didn't have anything more than it just being somewhat entertaining to watch.
There wasn't an uplifting score. There wasn't any profound cinematography. There was a couple of fun tricks here and there. Like, I especially enjoyed the carriage scene when they were playing with portals over there. Like, thinking with portals. That's a lot of fun.
It was a really cool...
yeah.
It's honestly, the thing about that scene in particular, it was just that it's something that I can sit there and go, oh yeah, I can definitely see a group of players getting this creative and being able to do this because they were smart about it.
And that's the thing. I completely agree with you, Raph, that it is 100% not great cinematography, but it is exactly what D&D is. It is exploring all the bits of everyone's backstory. It is multiple stories wrapped up into one overarching plot that is pushed together because companionship is kind of the main draw of the film itself. They play heavily to those themes. They have everyone work together, and it does feel more like a family. They're willing to talk down to each other and make themselves act more as brothers and sisters would rather than co-workers.
So let's start with this first one, teamwork, right? Because like I said, it's very fundamental to D&D that this is friends playing together, right? Everybody's trying to make it. That's actually where the idea of a role-playing game comes from, because the idea is to successfully play, you need people who are each choosing a role that is compatible with the other roles in order to accomplish your mission, accomplish a goal in the game, right? Which is why we end up with people selecting different classes to begin with. That being said, sorry, I can see Jake is itching to add something.
I was just gonna say there, I will say, not only is the teamwork thing a definite part of what it means to have D&D, but betrayal happens so often in D&D in general, and that's where I think also, having the initial, he was part of the party, and then he totally screwed them over and took all the gold, and that is such a common theme that happens in it.
Thanks, Hugh Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Hugh Grant.
Remember,
a quick run through the two chief stars in this film are Hugh Grant and Chris Pine. And sorry, what was the name of the lady who was playing the co-star with Chris Pine? Chris Pine. Sorry,
I always am terrible with actor names.
Let me look it up right now.
Mainly because I just love their characters more so than
Dungeons and Dragons cast.
Well, that might take it a critical role. So it's Michelle Rodriguez, and you know what? I should have known that too, because she's been in so many films.
She's quite well known for playing
badass
similar
women
characters. Yeah, badass women.
That is her big thing. That's her unfortunately, I hate to say it, but typecast role is just, I'm a badass woman. But you know what? If you're good at it, who cares? Don't care if you're typecast, because if you're great at it, people love you for it.
I thought the character was great.
I thought she was fantastic.
It was good because it was sincere.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we're going to put this on a poster and then sell. No, it was just, let's have a barbarian who's going to play a barbarian.
Who's going to do it best.
Yeah.
It's better than
I'm just glad Vin Diesel was not in this movie.
Why not?
I'm just kidding.
I wanted to see him. I wanted to see Matt Mercer. I wanted to see anyone of Critical Role just in the background. Just draw attention to for half a second.
A controversial take for people who really like D&D. I don't care at all about Critical Role. I don't care at all about Matt Mercer.
They made like one Critical Role reference.
Did they?
Yeah, they did.
Whatever.
What was it?
The fresh cut grass bit.
Okay.
That is the name of.
Is it
why am I
from?
blank?
It's from a season
season
3
3.
thing, right? Yeah.
One of their characters is named Fresh Crust.
I don't actually watch the stuff. The only thing I watch is like the new stuff on Amazon, FYI. So I have no idea about this.
I've watched none of
That
it.
stuff is
I've
great.
listened to none of it.
One-
I've seen Matt Mercer do a couple of like his talk show things, and that's it. I don't even play Overwatch.
Fair enough.
I don't play Overwatch either. I have no idea.
Used to.
What that
I have
reference is.
funny stories about that.
I only
but-
brought up Vin Diesel because he's like famously in Hollywood is like one of the only people who's really into D&D and like sincerely was into it for a while. Which is funny.
I think he's still into it.
Probably still. They
Oh,
had
yeah.
him play when he was playing a witch hunter in some movie. They had him do a short mini campaign.
Actually,
To, like,
that
promote
that's,
it?
that's inaccurate. It's actually that he played a witch hunter and he pitched it, and then they said, "Yeah, let's make a movie about this."
When I was
he got his-
watching the
he was the
reality,
first one who's got his D&D
and,
movie.
and honestly, it was. I did watch the witch hunter. It was okay.
I would give that one like a C+.
It wasn't amazing, but it was fun.
Yeah, no, and that's the main thing I can say about this movie. Was it funny? Yes. It had a lot of moments that made me genuinely chuckle in ways that I hadn't before.
There's nothing
It
that made
is-
me outright bellow laughing, but I could hear it in the theater still, mainly from someone we know. Actually,
I was right beside him. I was laughing as well. Those were good moments.
you know what? I think I could pick up a little bit of your chuckle in there.
to avoid going down a rabbit hole with Dominic Toretto. Another thing that I noticed about the movie that I quite liked was there was almost like the movie to me is most important when it's referencing something a little meta. Now it weaves it in a very beautiful way, but like there is a scene, for instance, on the beach where we getting it to a point where we have our lowest low with the characters, where they're on the beach and they're like, oh, maybe we should just give up. And the main character, played by Chris Pine, gives a bit of a speech to the others saying, we haven't actually failed until we accept that we failed. The D&D game, even though we're in our lowest lows, is not over. It's not gone wrong. It's just, this is a low point. We don't have to argue and everybody leaves the table because that's when it was a bad game.
Yeah.
Right? When you argue with your friends and it doesn't go well and people don't have a good time, you know, you roll a 1 every once in a while.
Yeah,
You
sometimes
biff it. You don't always win the game.
sometimes you just have the worst luck and you swear you're cursed, but that's just part of it.
Yeah,
And that's how you tell the story.
to your imaginary character.
Oh yeah.
But when you get up from the table after arguing with your friends and leave, that's when you've actually lost the game. There's not many ways to really win D&D.
Yeah, there's very few.
You can accomplish a goal, but it's often just a little goal in the way of bigger goals.
Yeah.
And when you've accomplished the bigger goals, oftentimes that doesn't mean that the campaign is over at all.
Yeah. There is usually a final portion to most campaigns, and there is the end goal.
Yeah.
But again, it's something that you're gonna have to hit a lot of those goals on the way to that one, and on that path, you're really gonna run into you're not rarely, but actually quite consistently, you're gonna run into hiccups, and you're gonna run into those lows.
You're going to run into moments that are going to make you argue with the people that you're playing with.
100%, because decisions have to be made. And it might not be decisions on, well, should we cut and run? Because that's a very black and white decision that they kind of showed there. It's like,
Yeah.
well, insurmountable odds are in front of us. We can't use this thing that we need to be able to succeed to the ultimate goal. So what do? We just give up. But generally speaking, most lows, that's not what it's about. It's more diverse and dynamic and what's
Now,
happening.
What I would add, the other thing that I thought was actually, I thought it would be very potent if they actually spent a little bit more time on this. The villain in the story, for the most part, she's in the background.
Yeah.
She just looks creepy and is there. And we don't realize how dangerous she is until later on. But because of the silence of her character, we actually don't get a lot of insight into her motivations. We just get blatantly evil, like boring kind of evil.
Yeah. Like,
And one of the things that one of the things that felt so lacking there was because when she finally did open her mouth to speak, I was like, this is a really cool theme, is that she started going off on be like, finally, I'm getting what I want after sitting through all of your nonsense and your stupid little quips and you goofing off. And I was like, yeah, that's right. Every character in this movie except her is a goofball.
No, actually, it's every single character except the party is taking it seriously, which is also to the extent
very D&D.
yeah.
Very
And
much.
the theme that could go behind that is like, if you're someone who's sitting at the table trying to get like a story out of it, like the Book of Narnia or something like that, a lot of the friend aspects of it are gonna fly over your head, because much like Guardians of the Galaxy, this is a lot of silliness that goes on. There's a lot of silliness that goes on in D&D games. There's a lot of straight up goofing off because you're playing in your imagination. You're joking around with your friends. Oftentimes you are able to hold it together and have a story, but sometimes people just get caught up in the joke. And if you're somebody who's coming to the table to sit down seriously, to try to play somebody dark and brooding,
Or edgy.
you're not gonna get what you want.
Well, no, sometimes they play to that trope, but it becomes a comedy spectacle for the rest of the party because they're not doing it right. They just kind of look and they're like, "Why are you taking this so seriously?"
Yeah, I thought it could have been more potent if we'd seen her interact with them or show more personality or something like that.
I would have liked more taunting for sure. I think that would have been something that, I mean, I don't know, based off of how they designed her character, it would have been better if she was tormenting them more so throughout the entire thing. In
Or
a way,
even
like
if
mentally.
she was linked up with them a little bit more throughout the thing. If she was like the friend that had betrayed them,
Yeah.
that would be way more interesting, because then we'd actually have, this is the friend who goes too serious and forgets to have fun.
I will say though, there was a point where she did get to have that other interaction, not just the end point, but the one before that when Chris Pine's character was pouring his heart out to
To the party.
a Mirage,
Yeah.
right? And she just revealed herself in a way, and that there's that level of mental torment there where
Yeah.
it's like you just professed everything and then just had this terrible thing just mess with your mind about, I thought I was talking to somebody else
Yeah.
who was important to me, and I was saying something that I've been wanting to say for years and I can't, and now they're just cackling at me and they're about to just absolutely annihilate me because they can. So there's those moments that she did have, but again, it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough interaction.
Yeah, which is really where this movie falls short, is that it feels like it was too much jammed into too little, and at the same time it wasn't enough.
I would have been happy
I
with
feel
two
like
movies.
It would have been an excellent Netflix show,
I think
a season of 20-minute episodes. I would buy that.
I don't know about 20 minutes. I actually think if they were to do it, if they wanted to tell the story the best way they could have done it, they probably would have had to gone the Game of Thrones route. And that would have been 10 episodes.
That's way too much.
No, because that's exactly what
exactly
Critical Role did. And I think Critical Role is... I don't know how you've been feeling about them, but they did a very excellent campaign. And they did one thing that I really wish this movie had done justice, and that would be dragons. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, I meant more so... I think, again, this goes back to them jumping too much between overarching goals to hit that end goal. If they wanted to really get you more invested with a 10, episode season, where the end of the episode is the end of the arc, you could introduce more characters. You could have more interaction, of course, with the big bad evil and the party, where they might be stopping them at different points, they might be tormenting them at different points. You could introduce characters more slowly, where it has more impact. You could probably kill characters as well, where it would have even greater impact. Because I feel like that's something that's, again, in this movie in particular, they were afraid to do, but it's a reality of D&D is that sometimes, you could have spent... And like we said before, there's multi-year epic campaigns where it can span... I have a game running that's been going on for 4 years. Characters die. And sometimes it's multiple deaths for that character, and that's fine. Sometimes they can be killed and brought back through various magical means, especially in D&D. There's so many ways to do it. But the point of it is, if they wanted to tell a better story, they needed to do probably more of a Game of Thrones approach to it, where it's seasons, longer episodes.
Yeah.
That would have been a better...
Well, what I'm thinking is that this is probably like a good one-shot style campaign movie, right? And the idea is to have the Dungeons and Dragons cinematic universe name up there, so that now we can grab another A-lister, another B-listers, some other B-listers, some C-listers, and then make a whole other party a whole new campaign.
New Rising
under
Stars.
Dungeons. Yeah.
Honestly, give the... I would love to see in the future the proper stories from Faerun, the old D&D stories, Drizzt and the
I was quite
Companions of the Hall.
surprised that we didn't see anything about Drizzt.
It wasn't his campaign.
I'm happy. I'm
No.
happy, to be honest. The
They couldn't
heroes of the
spoil
companions are fantastic. They really are. But if you want to get people more interested who aren't just hardcore fans, tell something new.
Yeah.
Because
agree.
nobody wants... I mean, you want to see things.
I'm saying I was surprised. I'm happy that we didn't see anything anybody knew. I'm glad it was brand new stuff. I hate having to get wrapped up in somebody else's campaign.
Yeah.
It's very annoying.
Yeah, it's an all-new campaign with a familiar enemy and familiar spells and items.
And honestly, when you look at it, it's great because it means that just like what Stranger Things did, I think you'll probably see it become even more prevalent than it already is now. Because it kind of made it went through a different kind of rise, like for D&D. You went from this thing in the 80s that at one point people were like, don't let your children play it, it's cults and devils, and it's a
started off
demonic
in the
cult.
70s, and then around the 80s they had the satanic panic.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes, it's just
Much
that
of the
there's a
history-
point where it was demonized, and then it wasn't until late 2010 or early
Well, the thing is,
2010s.
it was demonized, and then in the 90s it was just for nerds. And the thing is that D&D's popularity was also correlated with nerd culture popularity. So by the time we're into the 2000s and the 2010s, and we see this bit of a flip where nerd culture is now mainstream. Case in point, Marvel's Avengers, one of the biggest franchises in the world, used to be nerdy stuff. It used to be nerds to
Star
read
Wars,
Iron
and now we're starting to see D&D and I'm so thankful Warhammer becoming mainstream.
There's a lot of that culture that's now seeped into mainstream culture, and I think part of it is just because of the who is a more prevalent demographic now. Again, the difference is that you now have this new generation that's coming up that are finally hitting the age where they can experience like movies and have memories and all that sort of stuff and engage in these type of games and these different franchises versus back in like the 70s and 80s and even the 90s. I mean, the most prevalent like I guess age demographic was baby boomers, right? They didn't care about this. That wasn't what they cared about. It's not. In
Apparently
general.
they loved Fast and Furious, which is...
Well, but again, it's because you're showing things that they cared about at the time, which a lot of people, especially in America, muscle cars was a huge thing. Yeah, and it's
Money, fast cars, women, and
They're on to the last one
violence.
now, Fast X. Your verdicts, gentlemen. We heard, Jake, you gave yours.
It's
a
B.
bit.
It's B plus.
B plus.
It's
It's
a B.
B plus.
Are we doing letter grades? I usually do out of 10.
Out of 10.
Out of 10? I'll give it a solid 7.
I would give it an 8.
I expected to give it 7.3. I will give it 6.8.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have an average of about 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little over.
So that is the Forest
Aiden,
Creek
what were
reviews.
your overall thoughts? Don't do my show. I say the Forest Creek. You don't say anything.
No, but I found it to be a very good movie, a great intro to D&D, and a wonderful game to play as an experienced veteran, calling out all the different pieces. I was having conversations with my wife as we're watching, because we like to talk back and forth during movies. And we're
You're
like,
those people.
oh, we are those people, and I called so many of those.
Listen, every time I watched your wife and my fiance lean over and talk, I just cringed because I hate that.
Meanwhile, I lean over and chat with them and tell them
freaking
why they're
hate it.
both wrong and I've got the correct theory.
Yes,
then I
that's
feel
right.
vindication.
I am so smart. I am Aiden.
Wow, what a progressive mindset, guys. No,
I know. Listen, women, you're wrong. That's exactly what Aiden's saying.
Look, here's the thing. I am very humble in most aspects of life. However, you give me nerdy shit, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong.
I was mildly entertained. I hope they do more. I'm not a hardcore D&D person. I do like D&D. I like movies. I like that they're trying this out and seeing how it fits. Like I said, mildly entertained. That's good enough. I'm content. I don't think it was a good film. And I hope that they take the leap and make good film. Because, like, when we've played, like I said, not a hardcore D&D fan, but I do love story. So whenever it was my turn to be the DM in my own games, I went really hard in trying to figure out what are people's character arcs, what is the story I can do, how can I deliver as much meaning as possible in this game by the end, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you guys, a little bit. For someone who's played it a lot, I'm not very well read into D&D lore at all. I listened to a little bit of an audiobook about the Legends of Drizzt because somebody told me that Ice-T reads one of the chapters, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I listened to it, and Ice-T is a good narrator. When I hear him go, Menzo Baron's on, Drizzt turned to his companion. It was really well done.
But speaking to like the whole lore thing and the things that I noticed from the movie that were accurate, ones that kind of took me a minute, is the races for mainly the tiefling. Mainly because I've always imagined a tiefling not looking like a ginger kid.
Did not notice that she was a tiefling until she pointed out that she had horns. I was like, oh, that's right.
I saw the horns. I thought she was just a fae or something.
What
and I was
is a tiefling? For people who don't know.
Tieflings are supposedly children born into a family that has some demonic or devilish lineage. Demons and devils being separate in the universe, one being more on the side of chaos, one being more on the side of law, but both being very dark.
So
and as a result, a child born of that is generally viewed as an ill omen.
We actually need to explain something real quick. One of the things that you do when you create a character in D&D, you pick their alignment. And those, basically, we've seen those grids where, there is good to evil, and there is chaos to law. And then there's, of course, neutrality. Yeah. So you end up being a mixture of these two things. You're either lawful evil, you're chaotic good, you're neutral, you're like something in...
Yeah, so generally speaking, it's more of moral guidelines and mechanics wise to help you build your character. And there are several things that they put in there to help you kind of formulate what you're going to play. Alignment is actually, I think it's one of the things that comes last on the list of things that they choose. Typically, you'll probably choose your race and then your class, or it might be in reverse. That happens quite often. It's like the first two choices, it's that, and it's not really like you do this one then this one. You can do whatever you want in that order. Then you, in D&D, at least in 5e, you pick backgrounds to help give you and round out all your skills, and it also acts as a way for you to try and develop your backstory for your character, to really try and make it come to life. And
because you are role-playing, there is an element of role-playing in it. Like, obviously you can play the game by just saying, my character walks over to the door and smashes it or something.
Yeah, I think the better thing is to like try and engage more when you're doing it. Like, try and actually, say, I'm gonna go over the door, instead of saying, whatever your character's name is goes over the door.
Because you are your character.
Yeah, and
at least you can be.
For new people, I'll say this: my very first time, I didn't put any of what I would deem myself at the time into it. I just kind of made a thing because I was like, well, this might be cool. And it was completely outside of my comfort zone. And then the next thing I made was, again, the same thing, because I was trying to see if, maybe it's just I'm new to it. I'm trying to get used to it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, after, no, that's definitely not me. And I feel more comfortable doing it because of more experience. But it's definitely not like, you get to a point where you start putting yourself into a lot of your characters.
I always play myself, basically. I've played the same character in many, many games. Mango, which is just gamer tag username.
Yeah, that's the OG.
On top of D&D mechanics where I just basically play myself.
And not just that, he'll also switch it sometimes mid-campaign, where he'll like change out a character, but it goes from Mango to like, I don't know, Mang Zero was like a robot.
I try to put a spin on the name every now and then.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is Mango the Wave Man he usually pops up in every campaign.
Well, that was the Wave Man in particular, was just that one pirate one. But Mango has popped in everywhere. I can't not be myself in the game.
100%, and like, that's a cool thing to have. I have something similar, except it's not... I play various iterations of myself, and I try and now... I've made like my Azrael line, that's like the main one. That's been like a prominent, like, definitely the most talked about. But I also have another one that's fire, so I have like kind of two different alter egos that I kind of go through in most of my characters.
Yeah.
There's a few that are like standalone, but...
Now, I want to ask Aidan the same question, but before we move on, I'm curious about one thing for you.
What's that?
Do you have some kind of naming convention?
Like, how do I go about it?
Because I always just call my character Mango, and it just kind of stuck there. Because it was it was close enough to Django without being Django. And it sounded like the Ango sound was really fun. I was like, Mango, it's a fruit. Yeah. It's like fun.
When it comes to naming, the last name thing was more of like, okay, what do I think is like a cool sounding last name? And I'll take inspiration from different cultures for their pronunciations and stuff and how they would spell it. But like first name wise, it's generally I just kind of like make the character and I sit there and I'll actually just sit for like, I don't know, maybe 2 hours, and I'll just think about what does he feel like for a name? There's a lot of like times parents talk about, we have baby names picked out, but as soon as they come out, it's like, well, they're not actually that. They're more of a this, so I'm going to call them this instead. So it's me just sitting there trying to birth this character after going through all the steps and going, what is your name? And I'll sit there and I'll think for so long, and then finally I'm like, that's the right feeling. Yeah.
I usually just try to like literally translate a meaning, either a meaning or a sound.
I mean, the only one that I will say was based off of a defining kind of characteristic and background is Azrael is like, it's like
the Angel of Death.
It's the Angel of Death. So anytime I bring in a character that's playing an Azrael, it's because I'm trying to play something that's going to be a problem for mobs and that sort of things.
Otherwise, also, what is classically known as a murder hobo.
Not quite. No.
I'm kidding.
I definitely do. I played one murder hobo one time, and as fun as it was because of the way the campaign was set up, I could kind of do it without really stepping on toes in the party.
We'll circle back to murder hobos. Aidan, what kind of characters do you play? How much of you are in them?
Always a small aspect, but I try to explore something new every time. And as for naming convention, I kind of do an in-between of what you guys have. I do sometimes look into the meaning behind the words and finding a name that translates. But sometimes I'll just go with the flow and create something. And this can result in absolute chaos, like one of my more recent creations, Zekel Nakamura Gan, the Wizard of Discord.
Sometimes your names are
so
glorious. Yes, I know.
So amazing. They're so difficult.
What level did that character come in at?
So we're coming in at level 10 for Jenna's campaign.
So this isn't like a level 1.
No,
We're not seeing
this
guy start his wizardry.
No. The party has not been introduced to him. He's coming in a little later than everyone else.
You've just been introduced.
Yes, and what have I done so far?
You made a bunch of gibberish up and cast a spell, and then it did nothing. I think you tried to set some vines on fire, and the plant, for some reason, has fire resistance.
Well, when you first start playing any kind of video game, your first thing you want to do is press all the buttons.
100%.
At the very least, you want to press the buttons. If you understand how the game works a little bit, and that's like, I remember DMing players who were running the game for players who weren't all that interested in the story, but just wanted to have fun being their character.
Yeah.
And that's also a really cool thing to let them do, because they have a list of cool powers and stuff that they want to use immediately.
Yeah, and you know what? That's something that I think you can encourage as a DM, and you should encourage.
Sometimes that gets off the chain, and we get what's called a murder hobo.
Yeah, to a point. I think there's 3 extreme tropes that happen in most.
And when I say hobo, I just mean someone who refuses to have a plan.
Yeah, that's it. But as I was saying, I think in pretty much the D&D wide community, there's 3 main people that you know about in every campaign, and that's the murder hobo, because they show up way more often than you want. Almost one. I would say there's an average of about just under 1 every single time you start a campaign. There will be 1 murder hobo, usually, and it might not be the obvious way, but they might have justifications for why they do it at every turn, even though that's not what the game's completely about. Like, part of it's about combat, but the other part about it is about roleplay. The other one that you'll see is the rules lawyer. That's another big one. Well, that's not in the rules, so that shouldn't happen. It should be this. And it's like, well, I'm the DM, so shut up.
They don't always have that accent, but it just happens.
And the third one is the person that is indecisive. That is the last one, and it's usually with new players. If you're a new player or you're about to start a campaign you've never played before, my advice to you is be bold. Don't just sit in the background and sit on the sidelines, but also don't try to talk over people and try to work with people.
Have fun just being a quiet guy sitting at the game. That also is true. that's some of my favorite people to play with were the quiet guys in the game because I talk a lot. But there is a way to do it where there's a reason, like you could be deliberately quiet and attentive, or you could just be somebody who is having a hard time keeping up.
I think actually attentive is a better word. It's the person who's not attentive. And it's like,
don't look at your phone while playing
those
a
are
game,
don't look at your phone while we're playing a game. Don't get sidetracked talking about your other game that you're in or that you're running. It's not worth it. You should be focused on what you're doing right now. You should be focused on the story in front of you. And if you're not feeling that level of immersion where you want to do that, then maybe you should talk to your DM because you're not at that point.
It only really works when 2 or more people share the memory. They share the imagination.
Yeah.
And if you're not attentive, you're not sharing it. And because you're not sharing it, you don't get to have as much fun as we are in it.
And you're not really experiencing it. Yeah. You're just kind of watching people do stuff all the time and you're going, okay, I guess. But you're not actually like in the moment and enjoying what's happening in front of you and sharing in those memories.
What does Nat 20 mean? What does Nat 1 mean? What am I talking about here?
Yeah, honestly, the critical fail is like honestly my favorite mechanic. It's even better than the critical success. It's just because it's like you're trying to do this thing and you fail so spectacularly that not only do you like miss your attack, but you fling your sword into your buddy's shoulder.
The first time someone told me about confirming criticals, I was like, my heart was broken. I was like, I just love the moments of magic where you roll that Nat 20.
Yeah, like just let it be. Look, I think for us as a collective group, we don't confirm criticals. It was the rule in Pathfinder that we were gonna start doing, and I was like, why?
The point of D&D is to build and release tension throughout the course of the game,
as it is with any good story.
Exactly. And so the Nat 20 and Natural 1 offer those extreme examples in those instances, while you have the scale of everything between, plus your own innate skill to determine success.
Yeah,
you want to keep that beautiful, memorable moment when you roll that Nat 20. You want to make it worth something. And you don't want to roll again right after and be like,
of course, when you roll 3 Nat 1s in a row and lose your character, you can kind of damn the dice gods.
That did kind of happen to you.
Yeah.
What happened there?
I wish I could say it only happened once.
I lost multiple characters from Nat 1s.
Oh, it's just like a series of Nat 1s. Like you ever have those bad days where it's just Nat 1 after Nat 1?
Yes.
Now imagine each one of those is on a life-saving throw.
You know what's the funny thing is, I don't know why
they were under attack by pirates and he died because he got hit by a bomb.
Oh, I got hit by a bomb, and it prevented me from steering the ship, which I then Nat 1'd the controls on and basically rammed headfirst into a canyon.
And then as he made his getaway, jump ship, spreads his angel wings, he's soaring away, the ship above.
Oh my god.
Just bomb to body.
Oh my god. I think... You know what's the funny thing about Nat 1s? I don't know why, I typically don't roll them during sessions that I'm playing in. It'll happen every now and then, but when I'm a DM, the amount of Nat 1s I roll are ludicrous. It just keeps coming back, man. Like, I'm trying to have this very intimate, serious combat where it's life or death. It's hanging in the balance for both, because I want that to be the feeling. And suddenly I just roll 4 Nat 1s in a row, and it's like, the guy's dead. He's dead. All right, you killed him. He's dead. Congrats.
Whenever my players has a Nat 1, I try as much as I can to make it, this is an opportunity for comedy. It's not an opportunity to make somebody feel bad about their luck.
Yeah, that's true. That's
every once in a while, it's like, well, you decided to do something very daring or dangerous, and then you ate shit.
Yeah,
that was all you. You know?
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be like, oh, you tripped and landed on a tripwire and a trap went off and killed you.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Sometimes that happens though.
But that's situational again. But it's the whole premise of it. It's like it's either a spectacular success or an even just as spectacular fail. That's what a Nat 1 and a Nat 20 are.
So here's something I want to ask you guys about. Do you ever play campaigns out of the books?
No.
Yes.
Not a fucking chance.
I will be trying to run one of those campaigns.
You went as far, Jake, as to write your own books.
Yeah, actually, that's very true. So, for the viewers out there, if you're wondering...
I will pivot back to you, but, Aidan, you actually do use the books.
Yes.
You actually have the books. You brought them here with you.
I have a couple of the
core
rule books.
Sacred texts you brought with you?
I have brought the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons.
These are like the core, coursework.
These are the core 3 that you'd recommend to anyone attempting to DM.
At least from, yeah.
Running a game, it's recommended you would have all 3 of these books.
So it's about $150.
I'm not sure I've ever actually read a page out of any of them. When I've been playing, and I played this game for a solid few years. So, just saying, you don't need it.
Absolutely not. You
No.
do not need these books. I have collected them merely for collector's sake.
There's also like a ton of interesting and important stuff in there that can really enhance what you're doing.
Yes, and as a result, I do understand the game to a depth beyond, I think, a lot of our...
If you
the guys are
were going
yeah.
to be a rules lawyer, you should probably get a law textbook.
I
Unfortunately,
attempt
you have
more
been accused of it a number of times.
and I defend myself that I am a rules traditionalist. I understand that the DM is allowed to rule it any way they choose.
It works out. I always let it slide because I don't know the rules.
Yeah,
So-
which is why I love
Yeah.
playing in your games, because I will always play a spellcaster since you have no idea what's on the
no
spell
clue.
table.
I'll be like, well, you can do whatever you want.
Hey, Raph, I'm using this thing called
Here's the thing.
Thunder Kill. It kills everything in a 40-foot radius.
Yeah, whatever. I'm not reading.
It's a level 1 spell.
I was actually reconsidering...
I just make something with a bigger one of that.
Yeah, sorry. What was it, Aidan?
Sorry, I was reconsidering playing in Wrathfinder for a while, and I was thinking back to all the times that we've met the super powerful mages in your world and the great artificers, Salamis and like Jeffreys, and I realized something. As powerful a magic presence is in your world, Jake, can you name 3 spells that you've seen Raph actually cast?
No. In fact, there has never actually been one that I've witnessed.
I don't think...
Except for, I think, one time, one game, he said, you see 5 glowing balls of energy wisp at you and strike you in the chest. And he's like, they launch magic missile. And it's like,
Holy crap.
oh my god, he used a cantrip. What? Usually
First
it's
level
like
spell.
it's usually like, yeah, so this vial of black ink, yeah, they throw it at you and explodes in a 50-foot radius. Make your death saves now.
You have a very...
That's usually what it is it's like, I'm gonna throw in this wildly unbalanced custom
Well,
item and just see if you live or not.
That's just like me going, I want to have nitroglycerin in the game.
yeah,
How
that's
do
the
I
thing.
have nitroglycerin in the game? Just name it Monster Ink.
Yeah, you have super magical effects, and it's awesome to see. But spellcraft, as a result, is such a weird phenomenon in your world.
I'm a little
Yeah.
guilty of that myself for my own game. Like, I just let you make spells. Do you remember that? I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, you want to make a level 1 spell? Go for
I
it.
still the character I've made there is entirely busted in every way.
And yet, but the thing that I think that
Everything
both-
balances out because
It's, yeah,
you-
we like all 3 of us make
I have to
really
admit,
busted custom homebrew stuff.
the
to
first thing I
counter the
learned
busted.
from Pathfinder that made it so fun for me to play was the idea of min-maxing. And then once I saw Aidan do it with Babadook and basically become a god purely by playing the numbers, I was like, it's not about the numbers, it's about the drama of the game.
yeah, and that's
So
something
when
that
you make something that makes you strong, what is something I can make that's slightly stronger? Right? It's like, I'll introduce as much power as you have introduced. But every once in a while, I'll come up with something like technologically that's interesting, and I'll try to incorporate it in the game or come up with some basis for it.
Yeah.
And when I do that, I've usually introduced something that's very powerful and can shift the dynamic of a game, whether it is like a gun or an exploding vial of liquid,
Yeah.
or if it's like some kind of laser, or I don't know what else I've had in there. I've had ships.
You gave me a
cannons and stuff.
gun that used a D20 as its damage dice, which is insane.
Yeah, the troll rifle.
Yeah, for the new people to the game, like the biggest die you ever use for damage dice is a D12, because that's the next biggest dice next to a D20.
I don't know. You can roll a D100 for a damage dice, can't you?
I mean, you can, but that's
You're thinking too small.
absolutely ridiculous.
1d12. If you think 1d12 is all you can roll, you're thinking too small.
No, I'm not saying 1d12. I'm saying a d12 as the dice size, as the traditional largest
Okay, yes.
roll.
There's no
I'm not
such
saying
thing.
that it's our largest roll. We have had weapons that do d100s or 3d100s or 10 d100s, even 12 d100s.
Even in core game, you can get some pretty insane numbers.
Listen, there is a way in D&D where you can actually make it so you have near infinite attacks. There is an actual mechanical way of doing it. It's dumb, but people have figured it out. It's a samurai build. It's stupid. It's using a busted thing from the spell list as well, because you need somebody else to help cast it for you. But you can do it. You
don't even need to like play numbers in this game to like really break it. You just need to have a certain mechanic that'll just help you get through the game. If you think about a character like Josh played Phyllis.
Lilas
was
Laurel.
A character in one of the games that I ran where he just had a good trick he could do with his sword, which he could parry any attack you physically threw at him in order to negate it and gain an opportunity to attack himself. And this one strategic advantage helped him get over like any enemies that I planned for him to encounter in the game.
Oh yeah. I think there was maybe 2 times I even saw Phyllis come close to going down.
Right.
That was it. I remember the first time, it was like session like 42 or something, and it was the first time in like I think 30 games I even saw Phyllis get hit because he just parried everything. So if you have a good trope, there's a way to do it. I mean, I remember you telling me that Lixton had an ability to effectively reduce somebody's attack range to 0, so they can't attack.
There are so many ways around what Phyllis had. It's just a matter of having to have him face off against those, and he opted to fight things where he would have the advantage of being able to use his ability.
I got a really good example of this too, besides just that ability. There's an ability that I had with Tiberius. I could just shape the earth around anything. So if I wanted to, I could just make a ball around him so he can't get out, and he'll die of suffocation.
At one point in an earlier game that I ran with Matt,
Yeah.
who was actually on the 90s show episode of this podcast, he asked me if he could combine 2 powers, Spectral Hand and Aboleth Lung.
Oh, to do the death touch?
I'm probably butchering the name, but basically when the Aboleth Lung one hit you, it was somebody had to touch you to cast on you the ability to breathe underwater.
But you lost
which
the
means
ability
you can't breathe air.
Yeah.
So he attached it to a ghost hand and would just touch random NPCs, non-playable characters, with it to murder them, which is like a great way to be a murder hobo if you really wanted to get away with it that badly.
I always found that he had very creative ways to be a murder hobo when he was playing.
I was a rules traditionalist. Matt was a rule lawyer and, and a power gamer.
I would agree. Well, a lot of us are power gamers.
Very true.
Like, I mean, let's be real here. Like, I don't think any one of us here can say, "Oh, I'd never min-maxed or try to be a power gamer."
I never power gamed to have the biggest numbers on the sheet. I did it to have the most like power, whether that was political or money or just imposition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Aidan, your characters, I noticed though in the beginning when you used to be a power gamer and just like do the numbers, eventually you would get bored with the amount of power you had.
And that's the thing. What that led to was me developing more of the role-playing side that I now embody. It was, I reached a point, especially on Tabletop, where he had gotten to such a ridiculous power level where he was basically untouchable. And so the end goal, because he was that powerful and there wasn't really any true challenge except for things that were core to the game and that the DM specifically placed to challenge us, he just had to become more of a role-playing character. And that's where I got more into the characters and less off of the pure stats.
I wonder, because I do recall you played like another character in Goldfinder was quite similar. In the beginning, you played our captain until like you just got bored with the guy.
And that's the thing. I was very indecisive, especially when I was learning Pathfinder as a system.
You never had much of a personality.
And that's the thing. I don't when I'm trying to learn it. That's why I like to stick with 5e. I could easier focus on the...
Yeah, which I think is a significant thing.
I noted a lot of the spells that they used. This Displacer Beast I had known about. I had never actually actively seen a representation of it, so that was kind of cool. The Owl
Bear was the first thing I really stuck out.
Yeah, I mean that one was a little bit like, well, a druid by standard game rules can't turn into it because it's a magical beast and not just a beast.
I think in previous editions they could, and
that's why you're thinking it's an earlier edition?
And that's the thing. I think it mixes in some aspects of it. Because, for example, Mordenkainen's seal and the Helm of Disjunction, there is no such thing in 5e at least, but Mage's Disjunction is one of Mordenkainen's spells in an earlier edition. a magic item attuned with that, and a new Mordenkainen spell. Makes sense that it's the same lore, but maybe different editions intermixed.
I wouldn't actually be surprised if some of the movie stuff has influence over the update for Dungeons & Dragons 1.
Possibly. I haven't taken a good look at the rule set yet. I've only heard rumors.
Yeah.
But
I read some of it. They're changing it from backgrounds or from races to ancestry now. That was the new thing that they're doing with it. Which I think is just to encourage to be diverse. So it's like your main ancestry is elf, but you look like a human, or
you can have whatever background you want and identify however you want.
That's exactly right. That's what it is. Yeah. Which, I don't know, I kind of like the race thing. It was kind of fun.
In the context that there is a difference between dwarves and elves, and that they dislike one another, because the elves are face-speaking, knife-eared, backstabbing traitors. No.
And dwarves are nothing but pudgy, small men who grovel in dirt all day.
And that creates the conflict that makes D&D interesting. It's overcoming that. And we actually saw some of that in the D&D movie. We haven't actually touched on that part yet.
Well, it started off with, because it's all token-inspired fantasy, the dwarves mean something and the elves mean something. They're both different aspects of human nature. So when you're playing one of these things, you're essentially choosing to play a stereotype. But the truth of the matter is, they were invented as stereotypes because Gygax didn't design this to be a game that you're that immersed into that you're role-playing everybody. First ED&D was just dungeon crawling.
Yeah.
It was my character chooses to do X.
It was what we now utilize for most of our other tabletop games that are short board games that you buy, like the Dark Souls board game, for example, very similar to that. It's just a dungeon crawler. The Betrayal at the House on the Hill, Mansions of Madness, all these like big kind of games, they're all just dungeon crawlers. That's it. And that's what first edition was.
For sure. Second E is when it started coming out. They're like, okay, people were in taverns. They went to towns.
So now you're actually seeing the immersion of the traditional RPG.
When we set up the game, we started to make up characters. And that's what gave it its first taste of that kind of pathological freedom that comes with making your own story.
Yeah.
Third E, things got more complex. Now you could build worlds.
Yeah.
3.5 was we started inventing our own things. And then Wizards of the West Coast, Gygax Company, decides, well, we're going to just do a add-on package. Extra books. More stuff that we came up with that you can use to play D&D while still being in canon. But at the same time, they kind of just opened the floodgates of now you can keep adding on your own stories.
Yeah.
Since then, D&D kind of has become a model for the tabletop RPG, the tabletop role-playing game that you can really apply anything to.
Yeah.
The D20 system was built around this, and it has created some amazing spin-offs. Pathfinder, we've seen stuff like
13th Age is another one. You've got the Cthulhu game series.
The Warhammer games use their own ones, right?
They have a D100 series, which is very different.
But it's based on the same principle. These role-playing games
it's more percentile rather than additional and...
We're just talking about the wider model.
Yeah.
Tabletops have adapted.
There are so many.
There's always unique creators developing more.
Oh, you want me to do my
shameless plug? Go ahead. I'll this one.
This is when you do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a spin on the D20 system, but it's not the D20 system, obviously, for lots of reasons. I don't want to be under the OGL of Wizards of the Coast.
They've redacted it now.
You're right, but that doesn't mean that they won't put it out again. So
it no longer had to be medieval fantasy.
No, it could be anything. You could be anything. Shadowrun is a very popular sci-fi one. Starfinder is the love child of Pathfinder that they made. That was a really cool system for a sci-fi adventure. You have there's like 4 different Star Wars RPG games. In fact, I have one of the books here. It's the one from 2000 and I think 2.
Yeah.
And
everything in between. Some people play games that take place in you're a 1940s noir detective.
Oh yeah.
You know?
It's the basis of, hey, do you want to play an RPG? Here, this is like a generalized set of rules. If you can look at it and deconstruct the different aspects of it, you can make anything.
I tend to try to blend fantasy and sci-fi in as unique way as I can. I've seen other people do different takes on it. Aidan, I've noticed sometimes you're more of a traditionalist by comparison. I think you might have been the only person who ever tried to run a campaign out of a book in our group.
He is the only person. The closest
I still intend to.
The closest second to that has been Jared, who essentially ran a homebrew campaign, but in the actual canon lore world of Pathfinder.
Yeah, it basically turned into, we tell him we want to do something, we just come up with, and then he would read into the Pathfinder lore and support that.
Yeah.
Here's where you would go to accomplish your goal.
But you've ran 2 games, Horde of the Dragon Queen and
Out of the Abyss.
Not long-lasting ones, but it was...
I nearly finished Horde of the Dragon Queen. I hate this because the party developed internal issues between a couple of players. Or, 2 sets of players each, actually.
Was I in the first one that crashed and burned in like one session?
Yeah, you guys destroyed that. That's not the one I'm talking about. I actually managed to get through
the
most...
The villains showed up and we're like, we'll join you guys.
Yeah.
I thought you just didn't run with it like, okay, now I get to make characters that fight them.
The problem is that 2 members of the party wanted to join, 2 members of the party wanted to fight, 1 guy just wanted to fuck off. And as a result, I have a 3-way party split. As an early on DM, I just closed the book and said, this isn't working out.
Yeah. I mean, I've ended campaigns because of internal conflicts that have happened. I'm like, well, I've lost the inspiration to do this now.
My biggest reason for ending campaigns is just becoming too busy. Not being.
I wish I had that issue as like the main reason.
I just couldn't deal with the anxiety of like I'm thinking about this stuff all the time and hoping to make it come true when we actually sit down and play this game.
Yeah.
And then being like, you know what? We're just unable to find the time. We're all busy working jobs and other responsibilities and whatnot.
Yeah.
That was the sad part.
That is the saddest part. I really miss the early days of when I got into it, because it seems like that's when everybody goes into it, and if I really get into something, I go hard into it. Like there's that we played
Matt and Jared's basement, and then Josh's basement were our 2 hubs, and we met there like multiple nights a week.
Matt and Jared's basement holds so many memories from so many different campaigns.
Yeah,
and like that's where my whole like entry into this started, was down in that basement playing Pathfinder. And he was just like, hey, I know you're not really huge into like the fantasy stuff, so I mean, if you want, you can play a Jedi, I'll make it work. And I was like, yeah, and then eventually he died and I made more of a fantasy thing, and I made something absolutely atrocious, but
just like a monstrous character.
Yeah, he was so complex, mainly because you couldn't discern what the hell he was. He was the real like Heinz 57 man. Like he was just a mixed melting pot of a character. He was a skinwalking beast witch that also happened to have a draconic ancestry that turned into a fucking vampire.
Well, there's a scale between...
That's the scale of it, right? That's just stupid. It's so dumb.
There's a scale between orc barbarian stereotype that's very boring.
Yeah.
And I'm a half orc, half barbarian, half elf, half halfling prince of yonder who was scarred by this wizard in my backstory, and it's like, dude, we haven't even started playing yet.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's nice to make it nice and simple. I mean, I've been guilty of making really, really dark backstories.
I love it when it's nice and simple and becomes complex over the course of the journey.
I just love that first text I got back for you after I sent you Tiberius's, and you're like, dude, what the fuck?
I don't recall. Can you remind me?
Yeah, he was you're like, damn, Jake, what the hell is that?
So what's that gonna bring into the story?
There's this idea that behind every character we make, there's a piece of ourselves. And when I hear that, I have to go, is everything okay?
It's like, what's in there, Jake?
Actually, at that point in time, I was still very upset about what happened to Jensen. So, like...
Yeah, you were just trying to mull over it. So, can you tell, like, to people who have never heard the story before, have no idea what's going on? You guys... were in the story. You were Jensen and Lixton in one of my games.
for a good portion of it, and then both of us changed, and we became Tiberius and
Ivan.
Ivan, yeah. That was the end results.
We had a gang of adventurers questing to put together a solution to save the world before it ends. And the end is always not. You're bonding throughout these activities. Jake, as we discussed earlier, you kind of took on that leader, kind of father of the group almost.
I mean, he was also the oldest character, so it kind of made sense why he would act a little bit differently than the rest of them. Like, some of them were young. And
there was definitely a lot of found family in his story. He was like kind of coming into his father's footsteps of being a knight with a very grave task to handle, and at the same time he's kind of leading this group of adventurers who are struggling to, help cooperate with each other despite their differing personalities.
it was one of those things where it was like, it's not easy to keep everyone on the same task. Like, really, like, Josh just wanted to go kill people constantly. That's all it was.
He was off for revenge.
He was just out, but it was anyone. It was innocent people, too. He just murdered
He
them.
didn't care if they were in the crossfire.
No,
Meanwhile,
he was
we
like...
also had Lixton, who was played by Aidan.
Lixton had the capacity for brutality, having been a barbarian, but he had temperance. He did not want or seek conflict that was unnecessary. And
There
as
were
a
a few
result,
times, though.
yeah, but that's the thing. Like, if you piss off Lixton,
Hold on. You murdered an entire cult in your sleep.
He had Lixton was a barbarian who came from a savage background, but at heart he was a gentle and kind person.
That's
And-
very true. He was very selfless.
And along the way throughout this adventure, the previous thing that we had encountered to this incident that we're leading up to was this journey that Lixton had taken to like see what lays at the depths of his rage, at the depths of what is in him as a barbarian, and then opting to like, let's choose kindness now. Let's move on from this. And then we were confronted with a plot point in the story where Lixton's old barbarian cousin tries to persuade him, hey, you should come with us. We're going to go do something else. We're going to go do our regular barbarian business. It'd be fun to come on a raid. Why don't you join us, cousin? And then he opted to agree, more or less, a little bit.
No,
I
remember him
Lixton
saying,
refused.
actually, I don't want to do it. I won't stop you, but I'm not going to be a part of it, and just stayed off on the side like kilometers away.
Meanwhile, the other two characters found themselves trying to gain favor with this new barbarian.
I was more so...
It was you and Josh.
I was trying to, at the time, it was more so to try and get more information because I thought they had a little bit more information about the Black Knights. So I was trying to, portray myself as one so they talk about it more openly. And then that obviously didn't happen. And some things were done that...
Basically, they ended up attacking a house of innocent aristocrats. They were aristocrats, but not like in a bad way. They were just rich...
There's
upper middle class people.
Upper
they had their own
middle
little
class,
country home. And you guys just stormed it, murdered half of them.
I mean, we were also lied to.
Tortured
like, we were
one.
told by...
burnt it down.
Yeah, but we were also told by the barbarians, which we should have just incited because we're idiots. That they had owed them money for something and they weren't paying. It was like... At that point, it's like, yeah, okay, we can go scare them into it.
And then things got out of hand.
Like, at the best case scenario, you're doing a barbarian mob hit.
Yeah, pretty much. You're not wrong. I'm not justifying what he did. I'm saying, like, there are things that led to it, which are stupid, but it's like, in the moment, you're making a snap decision.
And there's the feelings in that party at the time where people kind of like being out of it and not really paying attention to what they were doing.
There's that too, yeah. We were all kind of in a bit of a stupor, and I mean,
Well, you say that, but I have a question. What momentary decision led to Jensen torturing the child?
I think it was just seeing.
He was just rubbing a boy's face in some broken glass.
Yeah, that was all it was. It was just a scare tactic.
Phyllis did worse. He killed 2 people in that house.
Yeah, he killed
and
them all.
still thought he had like a moral upper ground.
That honestly, that was the thing that I think choked me the most about that whole scenario. I'm sorry, Aiden, but it still chokes me to this day about it. It's like, yeah, Jensen might have killed a kid. Phyllis killed a mother in front of her child, and then killed the child right after.
He sent the child afterwards and bade her to come and get revenge, like someone had once done to him.
So he made a monster. And you're like, yeah, that's okay. That's fine.
No. I didn't think that was okay. The problem was I was in character.
Yeah.
And in character, the only reason Lixton even knew about this was because Jules was watching.
Yeah, Jules
being
kept
Jared's
talking,
character.
and Jules was
Who
watching
was
the
like
birds.
also out of it. He was like, he will tell you his own mindset is that he was becoming disillusioned with his own like religious beliefs almost and watching what was happening.
And all Jules informed Lixton was that the two of them had begun burning down the home, and he described the screams of people from inside. He didn't actually see what was happening. But Lixton took off running. When Lixton got to the edge of the woods and the edge of the clearing and saw the house burning, he was angry. He let his rage out, and Jensen decided to step out of the burning mansion covered in blood at that moment.
If I could put in the thing.
Yeah, because
There was this beautiful, poetic moment.
There.
Phylis had ran off. Josh's character had run off after murdering people. Jensen's character standing outside looking at the blaze of the house and being like, well, this was a complete waste of time. And just like...
I remember sitting there and like, what have I done? Why? Like, literally that meme of Anakin after killing Mace Windu. What have I done?
And then Lixton runs up after hearing the story from Jules, finds him. And just as they're facing off, Jensen's like starting to put forth the words of like, I don't know what happened here. I didn't mean to do this. I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. I leaned in over to Aidan and just went, it smells like barbecue.
I've been meaning to ask, what does that actually mean, by the
basically,
way? Why did
Lixton's
that
tribe,
light you up?
Back when they were ancient, the ancient savage barbarians of his tribe used to burn the villages and have barbecue because people would burn alive in the villages.
Gotcha.
And they celebrate it till today. They have an actual barbecue to celebrate their victories.
Yeah.
But it's always attached to that meaning. And then
Gotcha.
Lixton smells real barbecue for the first time.
Yeah, triggered him. That makes sense. Okay, that's why I was like, what the hell?
And that's the thing. It was Lixton PTSD on top of, like, I've been managing Phylis. I accept that this is Phylis. I know that I might have to one day kill Phylis. What the hell, Jensen?
And just, I lost control of the table.
Yeah, you did in that moment. You had such good control
I
over
was
everything,
like,
and you're
You
like,
tried to
fuck.
end the
guys-
session, and I told you, but I'm angry now.
And you both rolled initiative and then did the numbers until Jensen died. I didn't even have to say anything.
Yeah, we kept going back and forth. I mean, and the whole combat, like, I was not wanting to do the combat. Like, I really didn't want to do it.
I was like, should I just say stop, stop, stop? What do I do?
You can.
They just went at it. And I was like, just let it play out naturally.
Yeah. I mean, Jensen didn't even want to fight. Like, he really didn't. He was doing more so to defend himself, and he was trying to do non-lethal things to take out Lixton. That's why he's using, like, bludgeoning things, where it's not as lethal, and he's, setting up a field to try and deter him from attacking. But he's in a rage, so of course he's not going to care. There is a single move I could have done that would have ended it quickly, but I didn't want to do it because, again, like, it was a weird moment where it's like, he made a mistake and
Was there a turning point where you're like, oh, he might actually kill me?
When he could do the charge, and when he charged across and tanked that entire field of stuff and then killed me on that turn, that's when I was like, or right before he killed me on that turn, I was like, if I survive this, I have to end it. And I really don't want to do it because I'm going to kill Aidan. Or kill Lixton, and the maneuver was essentially a telekinetic grasp that I could make it so he would have to roll with disadvantage to save, and then I could yeet him into the burning building and essentially crush him with the burning fire, and that would have killed him.
Instead,
he tanked a 96 run through force damage, and
just laid into you with a magic hammer.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. That was how that ended, yeah. Yeah.
That was a solemn day.
I remember the next session.
The one thing that I wasn't, like, I needed to get that out. I needed to put that on the table and present that to them to be like, okay, this ends now, and I knew you could tank it. The problem was I was not expecting you hit 0, you instantly die.
That's
that
true.
is not the core mechanic.
No, the core mechanic is you hit 0 and you go unconscious.
Anytime a character dies in one of my games, because I don't know if it's happened in my games more than others, but I just know that I have gotten the chance to ask for people's character sheets.
I've had 2 characters die in the entire time I've played a game. One was Matt's and one was yours. And in your campaign was the most that I've seen somebody die. What?
Are you sure about that? We could talk about the multiple deaths in your current campaign.
Are you permadead?
Ain't permadead.
Exactly.
I'm talking about the hand over your character sheets.
I'm talking about
Done now.
you're making a new thing now, yeah.
I've had to do a couple.
I've had to do 2. That's it. I've had to do 1 for Matt's
my
campaign.
God.
It was on my own terms. And then I had Jensen, that was it. Well, actually, you know what? The
Holy
third one
shit,
was
dude,
Tiberius.
The Jackrabbits day, the day the Jackrabbits attacked them, and I took out Matt's character and Aiden's character in like one fell swoop.
That was the devil in that ones.
That's rough. But that's a dice issue.
Yeah.
That's just the way it landed.
Yeah, Matt's was too, actually.
Yeah, and you know what? That's how my first character died. Tarnus died in a 1v1 against a CR14 at level 10, like an idiot. And it came down to literally 1 dice roll. If I had actually successfully rolled that one last hit, then he wouldn't have died, but he didn't.
One thing that I do try to do between players on my table is like, I feel like betrayal and intrigue are just part of the game. I don't like discourage it. And so, but the one thing I do in place of that is I just go, you don't roll dice between players.
Yeah.
If you're going to lie to him, lie to his face.
Yeah.
He's right here.
I disagree with that just because there is the aspect of the more you want to get in character, the more the character might be better at that lie.
That's true. That's
You're
true.
not wrong, but the other thing though is that
Contextually, yeah.
even if you roll it, when the person says it, it's still going to come off the same. So even though you might have the roll and it might say you have no idea, you're going to be suspicious of them anyways.
And that's the thing. That's where
metagaming comes in, and metagaming is so prevalent, unfortunately. And as much as everybody here tries to turn it off, you don't fully turn it off.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
And metagaming is when you use your knowledge as you, the player,
Yeah.
to inform the actions of the character.
Yeah. You know, there's a time and place where you can use
You
it.
can always recall that like these characters weren't always meant to be role-played. Like we said about 1E.
Yeah.
So they were just game mechanics, and then people added personality on top of this.
100%. But because of the new edition and what it encourages you to do, that's what happens. I don't disagree with getting rid of the role between players when it comes to like conversational points and persuasion, because it really does come down to how do you word it, right? Nat 1, Nat 20 doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I could say something and you could be like, yeah, that's total crap.
Yeah, of course.
And
Yep.
just because your character rolled it and like believed it doesn't mean you're going to lean into it.
We were
that's
talking
where-
about player types earlier. I noticed that the two types of players that come to the table, it's a spectrum between gamer and actor.
Yeah.
Because the gamer just wants to do all the effects that are on the sheets. The actor wants to inhabit the role. And people fall on the spectrum. Sometimes they go from one end to the other. I've definitely seen people go from being a gamer to being an actor, or vice versa as well.
Yeah.
Usually it's just one of these two things. These are the two kind of energies that you'd have to balance when you're running a game that you want to be exciting for your players as gamers. They want to do cool stuff. They want to roll the thing and felt like they did it. And then there's also the idea that you want them to participate in your story and your world in a way that is fun and immersive for everyone,
Yeah.
including you, the DM.
Yeah, if you're not immersed in your own story, then it's kind
So
of
I'm
a
like-
dead story.
And that part to me is like, because it's the part I live in, it almost feels more important a lot of the time. So for me, is like, if it's in the way of the immersion, I don't want it to get in that way.
Yeah.
And in the same sense, when it comes to the games, the easy way I've found to do is just like rule of cool.
Yeah, I love the rule cool. It makes it so that you can have such better thematics and much more satisfying like conclusions to things.
Aiden, what is the rule of cool?
Essentially, if it is more impactful in the story to be described in a certain way, or to bend the rules slightly in order to make a more creative use of a spell, you would usually allow it for the sake of completing a better arc or telling the better tale.
Yeah, if something is
like the
cool,
spectral
If it's
hands
at-
for Matt when he would death touch people. That's That's a rule of cool moment.
If it is something that the player asks you and it is not technically allowed by the rules or technically shouldn't be allowed, but is quite literally cooler than if you didn't do that, you are inclined as a DM to say yes.
Oh yeah, 100%. I generally try to stay still within the realms of limitation.
Yeah, like it's
But-
creative uses of spells more often than completely creating something new.
You
out of the
can't
blue.
suddenly
Yeah.
decide that your character has a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
No.
No. So
But-
we usually do it within the bounds of possibility anyway.
yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey, if my character knows X, does that mean he might know Y? Rule of cool? Sure.
Or hey, I know the spell doesn't describe it this way, but can I have giant angel wings sprout from my back when I cast it?
And
Yeah,
I
sure,
feel
it's
like
cool.
that's almost like D&D's Supreme Court ruling that allows you to do homebrew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So long as it's cohesive and impactful and fun in the
And
game,
fitting.
there's nothing that should really stop you from being able to make up your own things.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why, like, none of my campaigns have ever been from the book.
I've never actually run one from a book either. I've only ran it from the core rule set and whatever I've written.
I've read into the Cthulhu Mythos Pathfinder book that I bought, but even that, like, I've nowhere near into any of it. Like, I just used it for a bit of inspiration and fact-finding, and that was it.
Yeah.
Jake, you on the other hand, like me, I tend to make everything up in my head, and then when it comes time, I'll, like, open a TXT file and, write a few notes and then drop it in the
TXT?
chat. Yeah, just raw text files. That's what I do all my notes in.
Could never do that.
You, on the other hand, Jake, when you invented your own game very quickly.
I did, yeah. We beta tested that for like 6 years as well, and then we took about a 2-year hiatus thanks to COVID, and then I'm starting to kind of get back to the latest final rendition of what the new system is set to look like. And it's supposed to be something very similar to the D20, not in the sense that it's the D20 system, because it's different. It's a mold. So although this is being applied to a sci-fi game initially, I am planning on a fantasy game. Could you use this for a mythos game, like a Lovecraftian horror game? 100%. You could use it for a noir game. In fact, it would actually be really transferable to a noir game, since a lot of the skills that are set in the sci-fi one, they're ranged weapon skills.
That's one of the sci-fi genres, is to take noir too.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's meant to be whatever you want. You can make it whatever you want. You can make whatever setting you want. Hey, you want to run something in the Fallout universe using this system? Do it. You want to run something in the Witcher universe doing this? Do it. You want to run something in like the Kung Fu setting? Hell yeah, man. Make your Kung Fu Panda. I don't give a shit. Do it.
You both have seen a decent amount of my world in the both technological and fantasy aspects that I go into. I do borrow a lot from other cultures and try to build a diverse world and have a reason for everything being where it is.
You're a 5e guy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
True and true. I've played Pathfinder and I still do. Like, I have a lot of Pathfinder games ongoing even.
I like 5e. I just had more fun whenever I played Pathfinder.
Pathfinder definitely has a lot more character options, but I think 5e, just with the more simplified skill list and combat, it becomes more of a role-play game, and it's a little bit more beginner-friendly.
It's very beginner-friendly by comparison. And yet, on the flip side, you have people who just hate how simplistic it is. Like Jenna, for example, my fiance. I introduced her to tabletops through Pathfinder. She freaking hates 5e. She finds it so boring. She just doesn't feel like her character can be unique. And it's like really like you're stuck in a mold. That's what she generally feels with it.
One of my favorite things that I ever did was when we played Pathfinder for the big game that we ended up doing, and I was like, do Gestalt, which meant that you took 2 classes.
You're the only person I know
default.
who's been able to successfully run a campaign all the way through playing Gestalt.
The thing that I
tried
loved
and
it.
I failed
I am
hard.
tempted to try it for one coming up, and I might actually...
Gestalt, by the way, for the listeners at home, take 2 classes. Take the best portions of each of them and then combine them together and continuously scale your level ups as if you're using the best portions of each
So
of them.
instead of being just a barbarian or just a fighter, you could be a fighter barbarian. You could be a ranger barbarian. You could be a ranger rogue.
You could be a sorcerer and a monk, for example.
The thing I really loved about it was we talked a little bit earlier about how like these classes tend to become personality types.
Yeah.
I liked that Gestalt gave you the way out to like, I want you to have a personality.
Yeah, rather than it just being, oh, I'm a paladin, so therefore I'm a paladin.
But that's the thing. You could already do that with multi-class in the base game, and there was a lot of encouraging combos.
There was
with
multi-classing on top of the Gestalt that we did too.
That did happen, yeah.
Glorious times.
Yeah,
that is what made Babadook so
Dude, that's why, like, at one point with Tiberius, I actually had Raph give me, like, my god item, and my own shit was already better. It was one of those things where it's like, can you really power scale past this now? Because I've made something disgusting.
Yeah.
When you have a gun, by the way, people, that can deal over 2,000 damage in a fucking round, that's when you know you're already past that point.
It's that despite having so much fun at these complicated levels, after having taken such a long break from it, it's like I crave to go back to simplicity.
Exactly,
I just want to be another elf in the woods again.
And this is why I go for 5e, because it's just like Pathfinder, it innately becomes that. The early levels are trudging through the mud, and then you just reach a power spike where you are now gods.
That's what happens though in D&D as well.
In D&D, it takes a lot longer.
It takes longer for sure, but I mean, the power spike difference, level 7 in Pathfinder is where I say that's where you hit the power spike. That's where you're like, okay, you can start to do some really crazy stuff. And in 5e, it's more like level 10 is where you're like, yeah, I'm kind of at, I'm at my big turning point. Like level 7, it's a good turning point. Is it amazing? No. But level 10, that's when you're like, oh, I can do some stuff now.
I never focused on the levels. I was always just like, how can I get more story power?
I'm just talking for like those power gamers and stuff out there. Like, where the big changeover and like how does it relate to, the roleplay setting and like that feeling of wanting it to be simplistic. There's a guy on YouTube. It's XP to level 3 or whatever. He talks a lot about like level 3 being like the money like kind of level to be at. It's because you can still tell an interesting story without them having the most ridiculous powers.
Yeah. Also, level 3 is where every single class will finally have their archetype, which means everyone has decided not only what character they are, but what their specialization is and how they will define that character.
I think one of the best explanations on the internet of D&D, how to play it, how to do it well, is by Matt Colville, who's on YouTube. He's like, he put out
you fuckers thought he was gonna say Matt Mercer.
No,
Not
I just
Mercer.
don't care at all for Mercer. I'm nothing against him. I just don't care. I can't get involved. I can't do it.
That's okay. I mean, there's nothing against that either.
Yeah, but Matt Colville, I feel like just someone who genuinely has like a really deep love of the game that's like almost historically rooted, and he's come to enjoy different parts of it. What's really funny is that I'm sure if he ever played my game, he would hate it.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
You would absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, what's interesting I heard after... So, the reason I said I didn't want to be under the Wizards of the Coast OGL earlier, by the way, is because there was a huge fiasco for the newcomers here, where there was like some things that was going to affect content creators and a lot of people in the community. Matt Colville's one of them, actually. It sparked a desire to get out of the out of D&D for that specific thing, and they're now making their own game. Matt Colville is currently developing his own game.
Colville is doing this.
Colville is doing this.
Okay, that's interesting.
For that.
It's an interesting thing. I can't wait to see what happens with it.
Best of luck.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about tabletop games, like we've mentioned a few today, like Pathfinder, Shadowrun, and like Starfinder and stuff. Most people, when they think of a tabletop game, though, there's the only one that really is going to be focused on, and that's D&D.
That's the Forest Creek Podcast. You can find us at our favorite places on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube at the Forest Creek. That's youtube.com/@thereal. Forest Creek, our website's coming up very soon, www.theforestcreekweb.com. We're dropping a blockchain handle very soon. That's right. You'll be able to find us on Web3. That's theforestcreek.blockchain. We'll let you know when that drops very soon. Other than that, we're also on Substack at theforestcreek.substack.com. And feel free to reach out to us at any time, theforestcreek@gmail.com, where we'll happily reply. We're always interested in knowing what you guys have to say, so comment, like, share, subscribe, follow, tell your grandma, all the fun things, and we'll see you next time.